Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, aka Coach Carter, and what if I told you that for the next 9 weeks we're going to be breaking down the new Marvel MCU show What If? You'd probably be gutted, but you're stuck with me, and in this video we're going to be going over all the Easter eggs, things you missed, and also giving our theories on the episode itself. It massively connects to Captain America the First Avenger, and the entry asks the question, what if Peggy Carter was the one who took the super soldier serum instead of Steve? Peggy Carter for me is one of the best characters in the MCU, and she's so good that you would travel back in time and kill her husband just so you could be with her. Now Peggy is someone who's just as strong-willed as Steve, and in the First Avenger you might have noticed that before he dived on the grenade that she too rushed over to it as well. She's just as worthy as he is to carry the shield, and if rumours are to be believed, then Captain Carter will be popping up at some point in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The showrunner of What If has also confirmed that she will return and that her character will connect each multiversal season of the show. Therefore, her origin story is something that we need to get up to speed on, and the episode begins with the Watcher, voiced by Jeffrey Wright, explaining the multiverse. Though not explicitly stated, I do like how you can come to this show just viewing it as an offshoot of the stories that you already know, or you can see it as a consequence of the branched realities that have been created since Sylvie killed He Who Remains. The Watchers are a race of observers that look over time, space, and reality, and the last time we saw them in the MCU was during Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, when one of their agents, aka Stan Lee, told about all the different personas he'd played in the franchise. The voiceover sounds very much in the same vein as the opening of Star Trek, namely the captain's log, which described the voyage that the Starship Enterprise would be going on through space. Here the voyage is slightly different, and we explore the multiverse and all of its trappings. In this introduction, we can catch characters like T'Challa, Carol Danvers, Tony Stark, Thor, Black Widow, and lastly Steve Rogers. The prism of reality then breaks and we can see the Eye of the Hulk, Peggy Carter, Loki and the Asgardians going before the UN, Thor, Steve Rogers, T'Challa as Star-Lord, his mother Ramonda, Doctor Strange, Cap Shield, Nick Fury, Red Skull, Tony Stark, and Proxima Midnight. Next there's Killmonger with an arc reactor in his chest, hammering away like Tony did in the first Iron Man movie, Doctor Strange again, T'Chaka, Loki, Peggy again, Nick Fury, Vision, Obadiah Stane, and when the layer first cracks you can also catch Zombie Tony. The Captain Carter shot is picked, and we then fly past the Hulk, T'Challa as Star-Lord, Black Widow, the Hydra Stomper, the Collector, Loki, Hawkeye, Captain Marvel, and a couple more characters that fly by at light speed. Next we stop to see space inside of a silhouette of the Watcher, and you might also notice that there are several coloured stars which look like they represent the Infinity Stones. In Infinity War, we learn that these elemental crystals were hurled across the universe with the formation of the Big Bang, and these lights being dotted amongst the cosmos could be hinting towards that. We then cut to the Hydra occupation of Europe, and see as several soldiers with the logo emblazoned on their uniform all march in unison. This intro feels very similar to news reports that were used in the 40s, including the footage of Germany spreading across the continent, which was parodied in things like the opening of Dad's Army. Who do you think? You are kidding, Mr. Red Skull, and we see his face moving through flames, which seems like it's pulling from the opening of Terminator 2, when we watch as the skeletal face of the robot moves through the fire. The Watcher tells of how the story happened originally, and we see an animated version of Steve's super soldier procedure in the First Avenger. We also cut to his shield in the ice, which we see revealed in the opening scene of that film. Things happen a little differently for Peggy, and though she is transported to the future too, a lot of moments divert and sort of go off on their own path. Now we cut to an alternate universe and we see that Steve is still going forward for the procedure, even though Dr. Erskine asks Peggy if she'd be more comfortable in the booth. Clearly he sees the good in her too, and Steve also gives her a smile, meaning that he knows she's worthy. It's here that we're also introduced to Colonel Flynn, who pretty much takes over the role of Tommy Lee Jones's Chester Phillips. We actually see Phillips get shot in the scene, and this happens instead of Erskine, who originally took the bullet. Erskine does die in the scene, but clearly they couldn't get Tommy Lee Jones back, so just took him out as quick as possible. Now Flynn is voiced by Bradley Whitford, who you might know as being the father from Get Out, and also for his role in The Handmaid's Tale. He's pretty much someone who views war as a man's game, and he sees Peggy as being someone who's lucky to be in the room, which is something that he says throughout the episode. However, her being in the room is what changes everything, and the observers remaining in the lab has a massive knock-on effect. In the First Avenger, they went up to the observation booth and this is where the Hydra spy left his cigarette case, which he used as an explosive to kill several of the commanders and officers that were at the procedure. Here they remain on the ground floor, and thus it's possible for the spy to blow up a lot of the equipment and also to run directly to the serum and take it. He shoots Steve, but Peggy kills him, whereas originally the spy managed to make it out and Steve had to chase after him. The moment in which he fires the trigger also looks very similar to the shot in the first Avenger, when she managed to hit the driver of the spy's car whilst they were fleeing. The power on the machine begins to drop, and thus they have to carry out the procedure immediately or everything will be lost. Flynn suggests Steve first, but he can't go in because he's been shot, and then he suggests Howard, who refuses because he says he's just a buttons guy. Thus Peggy puts herself forward, and it sets off a chain of events that leads to her becoming the first Avenger. She puts the super soldier serum into the machine, and it's nice that they used the same angle and imagery as they did in the original movie. The trailer for What If hid this moment and pulled a bit of a bait and switch on us that made it seem like Peggy was the original choice, and they completely removed the fire and destruction from it. They also changed up the moment in which Howard lowers his glasses, which looked massively different in the original first look. This moment clearly pulled from the first Avenger, in which he lowered his glasses in the exact same way, and as they say, it's like poetry, it rhymes. They don't really say it, just mainly me and George Lucas. Now, speaking of symmetrical shots, the way Peggy sits back into the machine and the framing of this scene is also identical to how it appears in the first Avenger. This attention to detail is carried across to how the serum is drained, which lines up exactly to how it was in the movie. Also, Peggy and Steve's reaction upon getting injected happens pretty much the exact same way, as both their eyes shoot open. They also use the same camera position when he comes out, looking like I do after a 2-hour gym sesh, and when she comes out looking like Abby from The Last of Us Part 2. God damn! Now Flynn goes off on one and he says that he was promised an army, but instead all that he got was a girl. This is actually pulling from the first Avenger, as in that Philip says he was promised an army, but all he got was a chorus girl. This was of course because Cap at that point was performing the Star Spangled Man with a Plan, which is still a banger. We can confirm 78 years later, and it's still a banger. Now nurses take blood from Peggy, similar to what happens to Steve post-procedure, and Flynn berates her. He mentions the SSR, aka the Strategic Scientific Reserve, which is what S.H.I.E.L.D. was called before it became the organization in 1946. Cut to Peggy smashing the punching bag like you should smash that like button, because damn, this is a good breakdown. And also yeah, whilst you're here, if you're not subscribed, then make sure you do, because we're covering the show for the next 9 weeks. Shabow! Now this scene of the punching bag, which she hits so hard that it comes off the chain, is of course referencing Steve doing it in the Avengers after he had to adjust to life in modern day. We see that Steve is on his way to recovery, and she chucks weight plates like they're frisbees, foreshadowing how good she'll be with the shield. Steve says it could be worse and that she could be on a USO tour, which he was of course put on during his first solo film, and yes, it is still a banger. We can confirm that now. Now Steve watches soldiers marching outside, and he says that Bucky just applied with the 107th. This is actually another nod to the first Avenger, as Bucky was in that regiment, and Steve himself initially applied to it as well, as he said that it was his father's unit. Unfortunately, he was rejected, and though Peggy apologizes to Steve, he says not to worry and that he never was much of a dancer. Peggy says that maybe he hasn't found the right partner, and shoutouts to Skinny Steve for still bagging the girl. I seen a tweet the other day on Twitter, I can't find it so don't ask, but they said that Peggy only likes Steve because of the super soldier serum, but I'm glad that this series showed us that you can still be a loser and pull a hottie. God damn. Now we cut to Townsburg, which is where the first Avenger opened. Townsburg is actually a pivotal location in the MCU, and it was where Odin fought the Frost Giants at the beginning of Thor. In Thor Ragnarok, it was the location where Odin died, and he said, "Remember this place, home." This came to be, and in Avengers Endgame, we saw that the displaced Asgardians had ended up there and made it their home. Red Skull pulls in, and the shot of his car driving up is exactly the same as how it appears in the first Avenger, with a strong focus on the squid that Hydra worships. If you've seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., then you'll know that this was a big focus in the show, and the organization pulled together to make a literal manifestation of the god called Hive. Here we see it in full effect, and the beast at the end looks a lot like Shuma-Gorath, who too is rumoured to be appearing in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Stark and co are able to monitor their movements here because of the gamma signature coming off the clock tower, and Bruce Banner was brought in on the Avengers to track the Tesseract due to his knowledge of this radiation. See, it's all connected. It's all connected. Do that thing I always do. Now this scene is very similar to the War Room one from the first Avenger, and even down to the lighting, maps and miniature flags, they've managed to recapture the scene perfectly. The moment with Red Skull is very similar too, and he remarks on the Tesseract being the jewel from Odin's treasure room, which of course comes from the film. Unlike that movie though, the soldiers gun down the Tower Keeper immediately, whereas they let him survive for a bit longer in the original film, so that Red Skull could just monologue for a bit, just talk about nothing for a bit more. Now the Tower Keeper was played by David Bradley, who you might know from Game of Thrones and Harry Potter, however here the voice actor is different. It's from this point onwards that things really start to split apart. I'm glad that they took the show in a brand new direction, as up until this point, a lot of the episode had just basically been the Steve Rogers story with a Peggy Carter skin on. We then jump to the bar scene in which Stark presents her with a shield and costume, and in the original movie the people sat here were Steve and Bucky. As Peggy hadn't rescued him at this point, whereas Steve had, the order is different, and Steve originally stormed the camp with just his prop shield, whereas Peggy instantly has the vibranium one. This allows her to immediately go out and catch Zola, as well as the Tesseract. Peggy jumps down with her Union Jack uniform and shield, and don't it make you bloody proud to be British? Bring a tear to your old eye, does governor? Now she takes down a giant Aryan soldier, which I might be reaching, but is someone that could be based on Steve Rogers to show that she's stronger. Hey, look, they don't call me Reach Richards for nothing, but Aryans and the idea of the Aryan Superman was something that was laced throughout Hitler's ideology. He believed that blonde hair and blue-eyed people descended from the gods themselves, and he wanted to create a master race of them. Thus, Peggy taking down this symbol early on has a lot of metaphorical meaning behind it that makes her first mission a really important one for a number of reasons. Now, Peggy getting Zola and the Tesseract massively alters the course of the way that things happen. Because he's not part of Red Skull's organization, he can't experiment on Bucky, and also can't make the Tesseract-based weapons. On the other side of this, having the Tesseract early means that Howard can create a suit of armor named the Hydra Stomper, which allows Steve to basically be this story's Iron Man. Peggy says Steve owes her a dance, and she then heads into Europe and steals a motorbike, which massively echoes when Steve rode on one in the first Avenger. Kind of feel this scene references The Great Escape, namely when Steve McQueen's character Hilt attempted to jump the fence on a motorbike at the end of the movie. Rather than getting caught though, Peggy smashes through it, and she rescues several characters including Dum Dum Dugan and the guy from the original movie Union Jack. There's also Jim Morita, played by Kenneth Choi. Kenneth actually ended up playing the high school principal in Spider-Man Homecoming, and in his office we could also catch a photo of Jim. Bucky hasn't been experimented on, so he's in the cell too, and he says, "Who are you supposed to be? The Queen of England?" And it's impressions like that, which is why I don't use clips from the show itself. Now it makes me right angry, this does. Just shut up for a second. Right angry, as me and Superhero Nexus were talking about this, and he reminded me that our dear old Queen, she didn't become that until 1953, so they didn't research this bit, and it just makes me so angry I'm raging. Now we cut to a shot which is very similar to the one from the first Avenger that happens around the hour 19 mark. This includes Peggy busting through a door with the rest of the Howling Commandos, and Steve of course did this in his solo movie. It was also referenced in Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 4 when John Walker and Battlestar burst into the Flag Smasher hideout. Again, it's like poetry, sort of looks the same. Now several tanks show up, and Steve arrives in his new dancing shoes to take them down. Iron Man's first mission was against tanks, and we can see that he too has a heads-up display inside the helmet, similar to how Tony's appears in the movie. Now we then see a montage which uses the same music from the first Avenger, and we see Flynn taking credit for Peggy busting up heads. Steve writes hello from Brooklyn on the arms of the Hydra Stomper, and I think this is an opposite to the bombs in the first Avenger, which all had locations written on them. Together, Steve and Peggy fly across the skies, fighting as part of the RAF, and we get an awesome one-take shot in which she takes down planes single-handedly, whilst Steve flies her from one to the next. Cut to the Red Skull's hideout, which is vastly different to how it was in the first Avenger. As Skull planned to bomb Europe with a plane, he of course needed one with a runway, but here he's trying a different tactic, hence why he doesn't have that location. This is a castle, and though I'm not sure exactly which one that it is, the Germans fortified several of them, including places like Colditz, which they turned into a base. Now we do learn that it's called De Crates and that it's located in the Black Forest, but I searched for this and couldn't find anything on the map or at the location. In the film Where Eagles Dare, we saw as a team of soldiers infiltrated Hohenwerfen Castle, which I've definitely pronounced wrong. However, Where Eagles Dare does get a nod in this episode, as it's the name of what the train operation is called. Similar to the first Avenger, several Nazi troops arrive to question what the Red Skull is up to, and he ends up killing them. However, as he doesn't have the Tesseract, he doesn't have a Tesseract gun to shoot them with, and he instead fires at them with a German pistol, which is called a Mauser. At this point, he unmasks, and we see Steve and Peggy in a bar together, where she brings up that she can't get drunk, which we know is shared in Steve's MCU counterpart. Peggy talks about how the serum has changed how people view her, and that it's helped her to be heard. Steve says that he's still a skinny kid from Brooklyn, and nothing without the suit. This is of course an Easter egg that calls back to his line in the Avengers, in which he told Tony that he was nothing without it. Peggy says the suit is nothing without the man inside, and she calls him a hero, and he says the same back. Unfortunately, before they can kiss, Howard Cockblock shows up, and they head out on the train mission, which of course pulls directly from the first Avenger. This includes a zipline moment, and Peggy pulls Bucky up, to which he says, "Thanks, you almost ripped my arm off." Bucky of course ended up having his arm ripped off, and he became the Winter Soldier due to the events that happened in the scene originally. The train is revealed to be a trap, and Steve is apparently killed in the explosion, but we learn that the Hydra Stomper protected him, and that he was captured much in the same way that Bucky was. Peggy goes to Zola, but unlike the way that Phillips approached him, which was with a stake, Peggy doesn't make that mistake, and she gets the info of him the hard way. They ambush Castle De Crates, and Peggy beats the crap out of everyone. The team ends up splitting up, with Howard and Peggy going off in one direction, whilst the Howling Commandos go in another. Red Skull places the Tesseract inside the device, which does look slightly similar to the housing unit that it was held in during the first Avenger, and everything comes to a head. This opens a portal up, and much like how the Tesseract sort of spelled doom for the Red Skull in the first Avenger, the squid comes forth and kills him. I know he survived, but yeah, the guy didn't have a good time. Now the Commandos come across the Hydra Stomper, which we see is held in a circular contraption. This looks very similar to the setup that Tony had with his original Iron Man suit, and the basis of the entire thing looks a lot like Leonardo's Vitruvian Man. Steve jumps in the suit, and it's powered up, which allows him to fly to fight the squid too. Peggy grabs the sword and goes head to head with that in her shield, which pulls on the iconography of Arthurian knights. The Hydra itself was of course an ancient beast that called from myths and legends, and it makes the finale feel very epic. Howard tries to power down the machine, and he mentions spending a week with Hedy Lamarr, who was a German singer and actress. Hedy was actually used as the inspiration for Madame Mask, a villain in the show Agent Carter that Peggy had to take down. Also, if you haven't seen Agent Carter, then definitely check it out, as it's highly underrated but well worth a watch. It's also on Disney Plus, which you probably watched this episode on this morning, so go back there. Quit this video, it's crap. Just go back and watch that. Now the castle starts to collapse as the beast grows bigger, and Steve saves the Howling Commandos. Unfortunately, his suit runs out of power, and Peggy pushes the squid back into the portal. Steve says, "You owe me a dance lesson," and she makes a date for Saturday night, which of course calls back to the final conversation between the pair in the first Avenger. The portal then explodes, and Steve and Howard are left wondering what happened, as we see the Tesseract being the only thing that remains. It is of course capable of opening doorways through time and space, and we cut to the Project Pegasus research base from the opening of the Avengers. Instead of Loki being pulled through the portal though, Peggy is, and she arrives to see Nick Fury and Hawkeye. The former tells her the war ended 7 years ago, similar to how Nick told Steve at the end of the first Avenger, and Peggy looks devastated, even though she says, "Of course we won the war." She of course gave up everything trying to achieve victory. I think that as the seasons go on, we will see her very much taking on the role of Steve. She still owes him a dance, and I've no doubt that she will find a way back to him once they get around to the endgame and phase 3 events of What If. Now as for my thoughts on the episode, I thought this was a really good first entry that perfectly set up how What If is going to work. They managed to recapture several moments from the movies, and it made it a really good watch, just picking it apart, trying to pinpoint all the different Easter eggs. Beyond that though, I think that the animation works really well, and again it's a highly produced show that succeeds due to getting most of the voice cast back, as well as the score returning once more. This makes it feel authentic, and if the season continues with this level of production, I think it's going to be a must watch, even if you're someone who doesn't really tend to check out animated shows. I really enjoyed this episode, and I was lucky enough to see episode 2 early, which is also something I think you guys are going to absolutely love. I don't want to spoil what the concept is in case you want to go in with some surprises, but it's very well put together and has a lot of cool characters showing up in it. Overall, I really enjoyed this one, and I hope that we see Captain Carter sooner rather than later. Now if you enjoyed the video, then make sure you leave your thoughts below on the show and what you think could be happening with the character in the future. Also, we are running a competition right now and giving away 3 MCU box sets on the 30th of August. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the episode. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so if that's you, message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our latest Marvel breakdown on screen now, which will be popping up in one of the end cards. Don't know which one yet, but just click it, just move the mouse about, do some random clicking, and I'm sure you'll get to it. If not, then thank you for staying through the video. I tell you what, mate, you have a bloody great day, you. I'll see you next week. Take care. Peace.